It's finally here, the 1.1 update for Wuthering Waves. I have been waiting for this moment for a month and 1 week. Finally, more map to explore, more echoes to collect, more story to skip, and more legally distinct primogems to save up. Oh boy, oh joy, I can't wait any longer. Let's dive into it, gamers. Man, I sure can't wait for 1.2. Hi, it's me, Miredio, Dragonspine's #1 hater. Wuthering Waves 1.1 finally came out a few days ago. My plan was to do the story and a good chunk of the exploration and then make a first impressions video. However, by the time I finished the story, I realized I was already halfway done with the map. And in the blink of an eye, I was already 80% of the way there. So I just went to bed, got up the next morning, and finished everything else. In total, all of 1.1, the story, the map, the events, the quests, and the wind chimes all took around 12 hours total, over the span of a day and a half. Now, 12 hours isn't too bad. Most people don't eat up content like I do, and will likely spread those 12 hours across at least a week or two, if not more. And besides, the actual quality of those 12 hours was good enough to where I don't really want to complain about the quantity of content we got. Especially for an update we got a week early. However, while the quantity isn't what I want to criticize, the quality was mixed. And that kinda blows whenever it is all we've got for the next 7 weeks, since Kuro has chosen not to move every update 1 week ahead, just 1.1. Let's talk about everything in 1.1 and not so much about what went wrong, more so what parts of it can be improved upon for future reference. Starting with the map. I think Dragonspine 2 is awesome. They didn't give it a frostbite mechanic, which is really all Dragonspine needed to be a good map in the first place. The addition of layered maps definitely helped with exploration, though it still needs some refinement. There's times when it's not clear what layer a chest or wind chime is on, and you have to just keep going back and forth between both until you see it. It is made worse by many chests being put in the same general spot across multiple layers, and also not every part of the map that has a layer on top of it had a layered map for it. Only the important ones. Like the underside of the dragon is huge, but there isn't a layer for it, which is mildly inconvenient at best, but it's still worth noting. The puzzles in this update were mostly really good. The Clang Bang puzzles are short and sweet, the bottom puzzles were neat but nothing particularly outstanding, and the sliding minigames were awesome, wish we got more. Sadly though, like I said in my last video, this update does suffer from just use Amber syndrome. Now I thought it was just going to be the puzzle we saw on the trailer, which is to say it's inconvenient but you can still do it without switching in a gun user if you're determined enough. But sadly, Kuro really wanted you to use a gun this update, because they made the entire update around the idea of you having one. Wind chimes are often placed in spots that are really inconvenient to reach without a gun, but completely free with one. The shooting puzzles were used many times during the story. There is an entire puzzle that shouldn't require a gun that they put inside a cage to force you into using guns to solve it. And lastly, the real cherry on top, the fucking worms. 10 collectibles spread throughout the map that are really easy to find, really easy to reach since they're just on the ground, but for some reason the only way to collect them is by shooting them with a gun. There is no other way around it. This fucking sucked, and I hated it, and I doubt the sentiment isn't shared. I'm gonna repeat what I said in my last video. Kuro, if you want to keep having shooting puzzles, it is a strict requirement that you give us a more practical way to solve them, because party switching sucks. My suggestion remains the same. Add a 6 echo slot that doesn't give stats or set effects. This echo slot replaces your main echo when you're outside of combat. Then you add a transformation echo with a gun. This way you can equip the gun echo for the sake of exploration without having to switch your party or having to handicap your combat capabilities, while also being able to use echoes like the Rider or the Herons for movement without having to break your set effect or lower your damage. It's simply a net positive that will make the game better, so I hope they do something along those lines soon. Speaking of echoes, the new echoes are kinda meh as echoes. There's no new sets, which I'm fine with, but just like I expected, these echoes are now part of the mids pool, which means that getting a specific echo out of it is now much harder. Certain sets, specifically Spectro, Aero, and Glacio, are now more common in the pool, while Havoc got absolutely nothing, making it the rarest one by a good margin now. This system is going to need a rework sooner than later, because otherwise the pool is only going to keep getting diluted and getting anything useful will become even more impossible. My suggestion is to give players more agency over what they get, at the cost of more echoes per mids. Perhaps specific echoes, like using 5 damage bonus echoes to produce a single one of your desired damage type, or 5 of your desired damage type to get it on the right echo. Whatever they choose to do, I hope it's soon, because echo farming is clearly going to be all the content that's left soon. And if they do it right, that might not be such a bad thing. The actual enemies themselves, though, are a little more interesting. All of them, without exception, are a bit harder than most enemies in 1.0. And that's fine, but there's a small issue with it. Some enemies on the map are randomly higher level than the rest, making them more on par with the player's power. This is cool, however, it's stacked with the fact that the enemies are already harder, both in how they act and how hard they hit, and suddenly it becomes a bit less reasonable. But then you add to that the fact that the highest that any free-to-play player could get in 1.0 without spending pretty much on resin recharges was level 49 and 90% of the last level, and suddenly you have a lot of players that are going to reach level 50 in the middle of the update, which means a world level increase, which means every enemy goes up 10 levels. So, you know those enemies I said were higher level just to catch them up with you? Well, because I leveled up midway through my first sitting, suddenly they stopped being 5 levels over me and became 15 levels higher than my team. Now, let me be clear. I enjoyed that. I liked the extra challenge and it made my personal experience a little more enjoyable. But that's because my team is made to take hits, not dodge them. Any player in a similar situation with a frailer team is going to have a pretty hard time if they don't know how to dodge. And again, my situation is specific, sure, but it's not that uncommon, and many players will level up to 50 before completing the update's content. And even if you want to say to just lower the world level, even at world level 5, the enemies are still hard and still hurt if they hit you. World level 6 just amplifies that. I like the challenge. I think it was a cool idea to have random leveled up mobs. However, I think the amount of damage they do for regular enemies is a bit much, and will ultimately lead to a lot of player frustration over the course of this patch. My recommendation is to listen to player feedback. Again, I liked it, so I don't know if maybe most people will. Maybe we want to be challenged as a community. And if that's the case, awesome, sign me up. Just don't dial it up further and further until it becomes stupid. A challenge is only fun so long as it feels fair. Speaking of fair though, fuck the Aegis. That thing has 2 separate ways to knock you up into the air, stopping you from playing a game until you hit the ground. I'm fine taking damage, but don't you dare stun me for lengthy periods of time, you oversized Orbis reject. Lastly, we obviously have to talk about the story. Oh boy. I did not like this chapter. I tried writing down my thoughts, but I had too many. I tried summarizing it, but that was still too lengthy. This is officially going into my to-do list for full videos because, wow, I did not think it could have... Sorry. Because, wow, I did not think I would have so much to say about anything in this update, let alone the part I expected nothing out of. So let me try to keep it as brief as I can. This chapter is as bad, if not actually worse, than the 1.0 story. And I know that's going to be an unpopular opinion, but hear me out. The only good things about this story chapter were, number 1, the fan service, number 2, the cinematics, and number 3, the concept. I'm not gonna complain about fan service. It was nice. It was a bit too blatant for my liking though. Like, yes, I get it, Kuro. These characters have huge boobies. Can you please put some effort into the rest of the story? The cinematics looked great, but without the rest of the stories to back them, they just felt empty and pointless to me. And that takes me to the main point. This story had such a cool concept, and it botched the execution so fucking hard. I genuinely think this might be the worst fumble of a story I have seen in a long time. You have a story about time manipulation and its consequences, but two out of the three relevant characters are immune, and the third one is only there for such a short amount of time that is basically inconsequential. You have a story about a town full of people trapped inside a time distortion, but spend barely a few minutes with said people and barely portray how truly dire their situation is. I mean, fuck, you seem really chill about it. You have a story about a deity being imprisoned, and that gets resolved with a puzzle. You have a story about a deity that was quote unquote injured gravely in ancient times and is sure to perish soon. But the bitch visually looks pristine and physically is still in perfect shape to kick ass. You have a story about a mentor and her missing pupil for whom she really cares about, but they barely get any time to interact. Said interactions are devoid of substance, and the fact that they care for each other is explicitly told to us but never demonstrated. Like, yes, Shang-Li is losing time of her life by being there, but again, the entire story takes place within, at most, 2 to 3 hours. That's like a day of her life at most. That's not enough to give the audience a sense of selfless sacrifice from her. And then, good lord, the ending grinds my gears. I cannot be brief about that one. I just can't. Every bit of it is so nonsensical, just because the writers needed to justify why we fight the dragon as a new weekly boss, and so they could make Jinxie look cool. Yes, it looked cool, but there's no substance behind it. This is not gonna stick with me a week from now. And that's just some of the broad strokes of why this story sucks so much ass. There's a lot more. The entire beginning section with Abby serves absolutely no purpose and could have been cut out because she literally does nothing for the entire chapter. The Fractidus are said to be following us, but this never matters until Shang-Li needs to have her cinematics, so now it suddenly matters enough for her to have to stay behind, even though there's only one elevator and there's definitely enough time to leave before they can follow us and then break it at the top. Except, just kidding, because it is implied they managed to follow us to gather info anyways, so it was all for nothing. The entire ending section is trying so hard to recreate the Shang-Li talk from 1.1 Genshin, which gave us so much world building it was surreal at the time. However, there's a pretty distinct difference between the two. Shang-Li gave us world building info, while leaving it vague enough to where we would speculate for years after about it. On the other hand, the stupid dragon just straight up spells out word for word who we are, which is quite literally the big mystery of the game. So now we have a pretty clear idea of who we are. Sure, some questions remain, but you have just killed so much of the mystery behind it. Not just because of what you said, but because you said it so fucking explicitly. There's basically no room for speculation anymore about who we are. Now we're just missing the why the fuck did we lose our memories. Oh wait, we get that too. This is like if Shang-Li had told us that Lumine was the Princess of the Abyss because of what happened in Kenria, or whatever the plot of Genshin actually is, I wouldn't know. And then when we asked about what happened in Kenria, he said, I don't know, I didn't see it for myself. I just know what your sister told me. It's so stupid, I almost want to laugh. Almost. And that is not even mentioning the fact that every character in this update speaks like they're reading the first fucking draft instead of the finished script. The story is 2 hours long, and an hour and a half of it is just meaningless yapping, info dumping, and or exposition. I could not bear to let them finish yapping most of the time. And I tried. I really did try to let them cook. But good lord, everything they served was undercooked or just raw. The only thing this story has to make it better than 1.0 story is that it is shorter and has less unskippable segments, but it still has some, mind you. However, it also has far, and I do mean far less moments of value as a result. Case in point, there's no Camellia in this update, which is heresy. But hey, next update we're visiting the Black Shores, so hopefully they get their shit together with the writing and don't turn my girl into an info dumper. Because sure, she kinda was, but at least she unironically had a charming way of doing it. Like, look, I am going to play you a raw segment of the story and you tell me if this looks like good writing to you.
So it can't hurt me.
Time on Mount Firmament used to simply flow slower than in the outside world. Visitors were safe as long as they remained within the temporal barrier. But what we're seeing now is different. The flow of time has gone haywire. This is what we call temporal disruptions. What was once slow and steady has become chaotic and turbulent. Some areas are frozen in time, while others speed up or slow down unpredictably. No one knows how much they'll age after leaving Mount Firmament, but aging from youth to old age may be a blessing compared to the unknown fate that awaits. Leaving Mount Firmament could turn any mortal to dust in just a moment. Such is the power of time within its walls. These poor creatures, trapped in the temporal disruption, are the most pitiful of all. Their bodies and minds have been ravaged by the chaotic time, leaving them in unimaginable suffering. So, it looks like the Fraxidus did manage to capture our sentinel, leading to the temporal disruptions we are facing now. I had wished that my theories would turn out wrong. As expected, my terminal isn't working. We can't reach Jinshi. The temporal disruption is preventing it from functioning. We can't waste a moment. Jinshi's fate isn't the only one at stake. All the inhabitants of Mount Firmament are in danger. We need to hurry to Hongjian, a town nestled at the heart of Mount Firmament. Jinshi would likely pass through there on her search for the Sentinel.
As an aspiring story writer, I take offense to this update. A lot of it. Rule number 1, show, don't tell. It's the literal basics of the art. How is this not... Whatever. You get the point by now. I just hope they do better next update. In any case, that's it for my experience of the update as of 3 days into it. I liked it, but the issues are there, and I hope they get proper feedback on them, especially the story. Because I know most of you looked at the pretty lights and the big boobies and decided you like it for that reason. I think that's fine, but those tricks don't work on me, and if Kuro gets positive feedback on this story chapter, the game's plot might be cooked forever, to be honest. But I guess we'll see. With 7 weeks of nothing ahead of me, and as of recording this, no announcement regarding any mid-patch updates, I think it's safe for me to talk about some of the smaller but underlying issues with the game, such as how lame Forza constellations are, how poorly permanent pulls are handled, how power creep is already in full swing and we're only 1 month into the game, and of course, my complete review of the story, because oh man, that's going to take a while. But I sure as hell have the time now, so you can look forward to those videos soon. But in any case, let's get to the formalities. If you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe. There is a lot more to come now that I'm out of a game to be addicted to for 2 months. If you didn't like the video, make sure to comment down below why you disagree with what I said. I read every comment at my own peril in hopes of improving and doing better in the future. With nothing more to add, I'll see you guys whenever I'm done finding reasons to hate the story. It's gonna be a while. Until then, take it away.